Hi, today I am interviewing Elizabeth Dufresne, founder of Garden for Us. With over 20 years of experience in community gardening, Elizabeth helps individuals harness the power of gardening for personal growth and skill development. Since retirement 5 years ago, she fostered teamwork, mindfulness, and connection to nature at a large 144 plot community garden where individuals and family grow nutritious food together. So, Elizabeth, tell us why and how you got started with community gardening.
Thank you for the intro. And I'd like to start at the very beginning, which is I grew up in southwestern Ontario in a, garden marketing community. And this is back in the 50s, so we were very reliant on our gardens for 80% of our food needs. And my parents had a very, very large garden, and I grew up learning how to plant and water and nurture and maintain and preserve food right alongside my mother and my father. It wasn't long after that when I went to university, I lost touch with that rural world. And I studied for 4 years physics and philosophy and attained a Bachelor of Science in physics, and also did a lot of coursework on master's in chemical engineering, but did not complete it. During my career, I had to move into the cities, of course, and in the cities, and pursuing computer careers, it became a totally different life, and I knew something was missing, and I really have trouble balancing technical things with what I wanted to do out in nature. And it seemed to me that gardening was going to be the answer for me. But I lived in an apartment and there was no way to grow what I needed to grow because we didn't have the space, we didn't have the time, we didn't have the soil. And it just seemed to be very, very difficult and impossible until one day I noticed in one of our community newspapers that there was an opportunity to join a community garden. So I put my name in, and a year later I was able to get a large, large plot, and it was just fantastic. So I went out there, and I really didn't know much about the climate and the soils in this area, and people were so helpful, and they gave me starter seeds, and they gave me starter transplants because they had too many, and that's the way the community works. So that's how I started in community gardening, and it became a real balance for me for over 20 years while I was still pursuing a high-tech career. Then when I was retired, I was able to pay them back by joining the volunteer executive, and I'm a treasurer at that large 144 garden plot, and families or individuals, 144 of them. And it's almost a part-time job, and it is worth every moment in doing that for our community.
Yes, I know it is, and I know it's so fulfilling. Thank you for sharing that. I have another question also. What excites you about spring, and how does it promote connection to nature?
To me, spring equals life, emerging life, and that has to be the strongest connection to nature. And there's a vegetative life, just as much as there's a microbial life, as much as there is a mammalian life, as much as there is an insect life. It's life, and it all seems to come rebounding back with spring. And so spring life means emergence. I'm in a part of the world where we have 4 seasons. So we're emerging out of a cold and dark winter where we're indoors all the time, and emerging from indoors to the outdoors makes a tremendous difference. Even when we're working with our seedlings and before transplanting, we have to bring them out and harden them off in the outdoors a little bit. And it is so representative of life itself that as we're emerging from being internal and closed into ourselves, as we are emerging out into the world, we need to be gradual at it. We need to be kind with ourselves. We need to take our time in going out and securing these relationships and these actions and these taking advantage of these opportunities. Now, I'm going to go back to emergence for a moment and just tell a little story. One of my very, very dear friends who has since passed away, and she's quite elderly at the time. She was one of the ones that in my second year of community gardening, I shared my garden with her, and she would come out with her walker and she would direct absolutely everything, and we had a wonderful time together. And after a while, she couldn't even make it out to the community garden, even though it was fairly, we had wide paths and that type of thing. So she had a small garden in her backyard, and it was just totally overrun. And it was there were two trees that had just taken over with their roots, so you really couldn't plant very much. So in the fall, I planted some tulips for her. And the tulips, of course, were covered with all the snow over the winter. And she was able to get out of her bed and go to the window and look out. And every day she would report on the snow is melting. Oh, I see a green leaf. Oh, I see this. Oh, I see that. Oh, now it must be 4 inches tall. And it was just such a wonderful way of connecting with nature and seeing how the emergence of the first tulip, and now 3, and now 5, and the daily updates meant so much to her, for her, and to me. And it really helped to build our relationships. And that's how emergence is such a wonderful thing in spring. With the indoor to the outdoor allegory, the light, the emergence of light is so important to our spirit and to our body. And we see that in parallel with nature. Spring also means action. And to me, as being part of the executive of the large community garden, it means that we are, as a team, working together, building our relationships, sharing the work, and getting everything ready for the gardeners who won't be actually coming in to do gardening until sometime in May. So it's a time for action. It's a time for just having fun again.
That's awesome. I have another question. What 3 gardening tips would you like to give our audience?
That's a very good question. And you may be surprised at my answer. My 3 tips are: be curious, be mindful, be kind. And you'll think, whoa, why is that gardening? Sounds like life. Well, yes, it is. And it's both, really. Because be curious means this year, why don't you go out and plant something you've never planted before? And how do you know what to do? Well, if you went to the supermarket, you might find 8 different kinds of tomatoes. But if you go into a place that sells plants, so like a greenhouse, that type of thing, horticultural, you may find 50 or 60 different kinds of tomatoes. And tomatoes are a really good place to start. And why not start one from seed, or 5 or 6, because you want to give some away, right? Every year, I have challenges with other gardeners at the community garden on what are we going to plant new this year. So I still have to figure out what that's going to be for me this year. So you need to be curious. You need to be curious about varieties. You need to be curious about what other people are doing. For instance, I like to know the why. And I get different gardeners sometimes on my immediate border, because with 144, you don't get to know everybody. But it was a young Lebanese family, just a mother-daughter pair. And I was asking them why they joined the community garden. And she said, well, it's because her husband was from Lebanon, and they always had a big garden there. And here in Canada, they didn't. And she was since widowed, and she wanted to have a garden. And when the opportunity came up, it was like, oh, we have our own land. We can now do something. We can plant the things that I remember that I grew up with, and also be able to use that produce to make a recipe and to pass on that type of understanding and flavors to her daughters. So it's just the why, the be curious about what other people are doing around you. And gardening, and community gardening in particular, is a great foundation place to ask those questions and to be curious. So that's tip number 1, is be curious. Tip number 2, be mindful. And with this one, I want to talk about climate and zone. And being mindful, we often think of zone. We're looking at a rose bush and it says, this is zone 2, or this is zone 5, or this is zone whatever. And we have to be careful with that, because you have to know what zone actually means, and it means different things in different nations. But typically it means what is the coldest temperature that this plant can survive in a particular zone. And that has really nothing to do with the climate that you are growing in. It has nothing to do with the microclimate. It has nothing to do whether you're on the south side of the hill or the north side of the hill. It has nothing to do with your altitude. It has nothing to do with your high temperature. It has nothing to do with, do you have a drought in the middle of the summer? Or are you inundated with a monsoon? So really get to know what your climate is and use zone as a guideline, but know that it's very, very limited because it's only measuring one or two factors. And part of being mindful is keep a journal, look around, see what's happening, and just note how you are varying from your normal or average climate, which means you need to know what your averages are. And you also need to know what some of the trends are. And I think everyone is noticing that weather is becoming more extreme. So you may actually need to be more mindful of that and have materials in hand to protect your plants, and then to be able to remove those protective barriers as it resumes more of a natural climate for you. And lastly, be kind. And with this one, the tip is be kind to your body. You don't have to do everything at once. You can ask for help. And that's where community gardening really makes a difference, because we have people right from toddlers all the way up into, well, we have several, I think it's 4 people in their 90s. So you want to be kind to your body. If you have trouble watering, then someone else will be able to help you water. If only the part that you need help with is forming the soil or digging or harvesting, then there's always people around that are able to help you do that. And in turn, you may have that recipe that just makes them a star at their next meal. So be kind. Be kind to your body and be kind to others, and really share your experiences. And those are my 3 tips for gardening. Be curious, be mindful, be kind.
Thank you so much. That was wonderful. I really enjoyed hearing that. And it definitely brought back memories of childhood and, just being out in nature. So thank you so much for sharing that.
You're very welcome, and thank you for having me.